Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Orphan Black, Season 4, Episode 9, The Mitigation of Competition. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Orphan Black, so I'll have to give a spoiler warning for Orphan Black up to Season 4, Episode 9. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So this was a pretty exciting episode where we get the reluctant team up of Rachel and Ira with Sarah and Felix, and a few twists and turns that come with it as they're up against the clock with Evie ready to unveil her evil plan. And I do overall like this episode and didn't find this revolution to these intense storylines a tad bit anticlimactic compared to the setup, which I don't think it quite lived up to. So first, let's get into Cosima and Susan doing their science-y thingies on the island of Dr. Moreau. I've been saying all season that I found the Rachel storyline really boring, but this episode made me realize it wasn't Rachel as much as it was people hanging out on this island doing things. I actually found Rachel interesting in this episode, but it was Susan and Cosima I thought were boring in this episode. So yeah, I guess it's the whole island storyline I find boring, because we also get a few more weird scenes with Rachel seeing the swan, which has evolved into seeing a whole village, and I found these boring as well. It's obvious that this is building to something that's going to tie into the history of the island, which ties into the history of Neolution, which they've been hinting at with that book Cosima was looking at, so I'm sure it's all going to tie in, somehow, and I gotta say, my expectations are not high, as none of this feels that interesting to me, but we'll see. Maybe they'll surprise me and it will end up being interesting. So now let me talk about Donnie and Allison, which I didn't really find these scenes funny at all. I want to make it clear though that I don't hate Donnie and Allison. I think they can be really interesting characters, particularly when they contribute to the plot as they did last week, but I just get a bit tired of the show using them to try to get cheap laughs, and I think they should cut back on that a bit. For example, I don't really find Donnie having sex funny. It's just awkward to watch. Before, we got a masturbation scene with him, and now an awkward sex scene with him and Allison, and it's just awkward to watch and not at all funny, which is what I think they're going for. And we also get the side plot of Allison having a crisis of faith and being obsessed with thinking God has abandoned her, which I could really do without, as I really don't care about it and it doesn't seem to serve any main purpose. So let's talk about Adele and Felix, as their relationship has changed a bit with this episode, as Adele talks, advises Donnie and Allison on their legal situation. Allison lets it slip that they don't need to worry about Detective Duco anymore, which of course alarms Adele, as she would naturally wonder how it is that they could possibly know that, and of course it's because they know he's dead, but for once they were smart and didn't tell her that. Of course they shouldn't have even mentioned it in the first place. So Adele was already suspicious when Helena shows up, so yet another twin sister of Sarah that Felix never mentioned. So this of course kicks her suspicion into overdrive, leading to a sort of falling out with her and Felix, as she can tell she's being lied to, but Felix insists he wants to spare her from all of the shitstorm that he has to deal with. But she points out that it just proves that they're not really close. So I wonder where their relationship will go from here. Personally, I hope they don't spend too much time on this, because I was never a huge fan of Adele, but it is somewhat interesting, so we'll see where they go. So speaking of Helena, let me get into her storyline next, as we finally get her return in this episode. We've been waiting for quite some time, and it turns out she's out camping and hunting in the snow and living in an igloo type structure. I knew she was a cicada killer, but didn't know she was an outdoor survivalist as well, so yeah, that's interesting. So I've never been the biggest Helena fan, as I totally didn't buy her change of character between the first and second seasons, but by now I just roll with it that she is who she is now. So I like her okay, and was wondering when she'd show up next, but wasn't hampering to see her. But she finally calls Sarah, who hints that they're in trouble but tells her to stay out of it, but of course she doesn't, and returns to town and shows up just in time to save the Hendrixes as those asshole neo-illusionist thugs show up just as Donnie and Allison were about to make their getaway and threatened to put a slug in Allison. But Helena shows up just in the nick of time to save her by shooting the thug with an arrow where blood splatters all over Allison. And I got to say, that scene was awesome. Although I'm not the biggest fan of Helena, I love scenes like this where she just doesn't give a fuck and kills anyone attempting to harm her sistress. I hope this repairs her relationship with Allison, which seemed kind of damaged before, but then again, she was a bit freaked out by having blood splattering all over her, but we'll see where they go from here. So now, finally, let's get to the crux of the episode, the Rachel storyline and the Sarah storyline, as they finally team up to work together. But from the beginning, Sarah is very weary of Rachel. But Evie apparently has her government approval, so she's just about to execute her plan to introduce her slug thingy to the general public. So they hatch a plan to find 2 runaway patients from some of the Brightborn experience gone wrong who have damning evidence against them. So Sarah and Art work to find these women while shutting out Rachel and Ira, and unfortunately they find one dead, which means Brightborn is looking for them to kill them. And as Art talks to the detective in charge of the investigation, who was the same detective that arrested Donnie, we find that he's also working for Neolution, which I find a bit hard to swallow. I mean, how many policemen and detectives does Neolution have working for them? Seems a bit overboard to me. Anyway, Art and Sarah manage to track the other survivors and convince her to go against Brightborn, but then Evie sends her thug to kill her, but Sarah and Art get the jump on them, which I thought was a pretty awesome scene. However, Rachel uses this opportunity to undermine Sarah by stealing the survivor away from her by blackmailing her. And then next we see Rachel is bargaining with Evie to restore her position with Neolution while giving up Sarah and Susan, so it seems like she's totally betraying them all. And in all honesty, I totally bought this scene, as I thought they built up to this nicely, and it seemed totally in Rachel's character to betray them all like this. But it turns out she was just playing Evie and recording their conversation, which they sent to the media along with the videos of those damning videos, and so it completely discredits Evie and Neolution for good. You know, while I thought this twist was awesome and really exciting, there was something about the execution that felt a bit fake, as in order for it to work, Evie had to have this James Bond villain moment where she just gives away her evil plan for no good reason. And also the way the media at her conference picked up on these leaked videos immediately felt a bit fake as well, like a TV trope rather than anything you would actually find in reality. But, you know, ultimately that's fine, because I did think it was a great twist. But after the epic defeat Evie pulled off in episode 6, where she took over and killed Kendall, for this to be the way that she's taken down does seem a tad bit anticlimactic. This defeat was all too easy. However, I suppose it's not over yet, because although she's wrapped in scandal, Evie is still in charge of Neolution, so we'll have to see where they take her storyline from here. And then we get the big surprise ending where we see Dolphine is still alive, which, no duh, we already knew, but she's in some cabin type place, which we must assume is on that same island. So it seems like she's been working behind the scenes to somehow affect things and what's been going on, which again is no big shock. In other words, it was a totally non-shocking ending, but we'll just have to see where they take it from here. So my rating for the Mitigation of Competition out of 10 is an 8, extremely good. Overall, this was an exciting episode with a great ending, a good twist that Rachel comes through and takes Evie down, and I do love Helena's kill, that's always awesome. So a great episode, but nothing spectacular. As I said, it was a tad bit anticlimactic that they managed to take Evie down so easily, and there were some silly and boring scenes in this episode, but I'm really eager to see the finale. So that's it for my review of the Mitigation of Competition. Be sure to check back here next week as I review the Season 4 finale of Orphan Black. Also be sure to check out my channel as I have many more videos on shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, and more, and be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.